Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 41 of Twilight Epiphanies Radio and the sixth show in the series, Our Altered Histories. My guest tonight is Steve Richards of Holographic Kinetics, and I've invited Steve here tonight because of his very extensive information, knowledge, understanding, and experience on the construct of reality. And during our talks tonight and how he has viewed reality and has a very deep understanding of how spirit moves through cycles and dimensions of time, there are 3 points that I'd like to especially work with that are going to be connected to the shows as they've continued so far. And one of those is predictions. So Steve, at a very young age, was very good at predicting the future. And his understanding of predicting the future takes us into a deeper look at how we are often looking at a parallel reality that played out before. And I think that's very important to understand because time frame where there are a great number of predictions taking place right now within different cultural beliefs and literatures and everywhere, where we are seemingly influenced to have the same reactions and choices as we did before. And I have a preference for us work in helping us to look at how we don't want to be repeating the same choices we did previous. So I want to take this deeper look with him at predictions and how he's worked with these with himself and with clients. Secondly, also then to look at the place of time loops, how we can get stuck in time loops and are repeating the same situation over and over again. Also, I think that is very significant as we're moving into this current time frame. And then third, to look at his very thorough understanding of the karma and consequences and effects of war. The predictions that we have had in the past is that there's going to be war, this and that. And it's time that we come out of these predictive programs that war is in our future. And we look at going back into original teachings that we should be looking at the internal war, the internal battle inside, not making an external. So Steve is the founder of Holographic Kinetics, which is an advanced Aboriginal healing modality. He refers to it as DREAMTIME HEALIng. He talks about it as he opens up his website as the rebalancing man's internally created realities through the cycles of dimensions that we call time. He accesses the life force of spirit, the internal dimensional world of all living things, where all creation is first set up. And then life flows into the external visible world of reality. So I welcome tonight Steve Richardson, how are you?
Thank you. Lovely day outside today. I'm fine.
Okay. So I did not introduce some of your history that is a very significant part of how you are working in this advanced modality that you do, experiences. So could you begin with a brief summation of what is the significance of your Aboriginal history that brings you here with us today?
Okay, well, first off, we're going to go down the genetic line, which is that generational line passed down in the cells. The day you're born, every cell in you have the ancestors right back through time in the cells because you're actually a hologram. And we can actually access those ancestors where trauma came through time and is still affecting you. So we go back on my own timeline. My great-great-grandmother was taken away at the age of 8 by Aboriginal Protection Agency. She was found in horse shackles at the age of 14 because they couldn't control her. They sold her to a drover, and at 15, she died giving birth to my grandmother. My grandmother was brought up in a cattle station very well educated by the church, but the maids, the butlers, the gardeners, the clever men, and some of the elders that were there, they all taught her the old way because she didn't have a mother. Now, as I grew up, my grandmother would talk about the old ways. When I was 4 years old, I was telling my mother the future because I already remember the past. And my mother said to me, I said, how do you know? I said, well, doesn't everybody remember the past? She said, no. I remember the past, who I was. I was an old clever man of the past. I remember all the old ways. By the time I was 8, I could make water go in my finger. By the time I was a teenager, I was doing mind magic. Not that I was doing mind magic. I wanted to know, what am I doing? How am I doing it? Because no one ever taught me. It was just in the blood of the knowingness. So let's look at mainstream society. Back in time when they took away the Aboriginal people under what's known as stolen generation, this was part of what's known as the White Australian policy. And they would say blatantly, here's half caste, quarter caste, 8 caste. Now we've bred the colour out of them and they're white. But you can't breed the spirit out. And in the spirit is the knowledge of the past. Today we have 3/4 of Aboriginal in this country are actually light-skinned because of that. That was the great Australian policy of breeding them out. Now, in amongst that, what took place was that we today, it's really interesting because I'm looking at a whole new trauma that's been created today. And the trauma that's been created today is that you've got all these Aboriginal people that are virtually white, but yet in their blood is the Aboriginal culture. And you've got what's known today as a lost identity. And a lot of criminals in the system today that we're working on, it's because of a lost identity. They don't know who they are. Because on one side, they look light-skinned, but inside, the spirit is still Aboriginal. So there's this conflict going on internally with these people today, which we're working on with clearing a lot of these people. So that's part of my understanding of how my generational line, and my sister, of course, I must mention her. As we were young, my mother would teach myself and my sister all the old ways, and the grandmother would sit down and talk about it. And I was always asking the question, why? Why? Why would they do this? Why would they do that? I could never understand it. And growing up, there was little about our culture ever taught, really, apart from the knowledge of the old ways. And the reason why was up into 1976, they were still taking children away. And if they knew Aboriginal blood in you, they'd take you away and put you in a foster care somewhere, or foster home. So in growing up, my mother, I can always remember saying, if anybody asks you you're white, you'd remember, you'd tell them you're white. And I'd look at myself and say, hang on, this is black and this is white. And I'd have a jolly good tan. My sister had an American sailor as a father. She had blonde hair, light skin. As my sister got older, she started adopting Aboriginal children. My mother died at 15, 17. I remember she came home one day after she adopted these Aboriginal kids, taking them in as carers. And she had tears in her eyes. And I said, hey, well, what's going on? What's up? She said, they called me white trash. I said, who? The communities. Well, there was so much bitterness and anger in communities towards white people that if you looked anything like white, that bitterness and anger would be locked in. Today, that's passed down generation line, and there's all this conflict going on, which is creating this loss of identity between people. When you go to corroboree today, you're going to find 50% to 60%, maybe more, that those people are light-skinned people now at the corroboree, but they're still Aboriginal. You see, the White Australian policy was to breed them out. That was planned, exactly. So my sister, been upset by that. As she got older, she put a car and a caravan on a ship and went to Africa. She got to Africa, she said, where's the worst place in Africa? And they said, Uganda. She went to Uganda, she said, where's the worst place in Uganda? Kingcome. So she drove to Kingcome, which was a war zone. She pulled up under a tree in a war zone. And there were thousands of kids, homeless. Because Idi Amin went through and he killed everybody with a bit of common sense. He killed literally hundreds of thousands of people. Now, those kids would have even been sold into the slave trade as prostitution or become boy soldiers, where they would have had to kill other kids to get that level of soldier to be traumatised. She pulled up under a tree and opened what today is the largest orphanage in the world. Only orphanage in the world has its own hospitals, its own schools. What happened was it was a war zone. Rebels came in, ripped the door off the caravan, ripped the window, and they're going to rape her and kill her. And all of a sudden, her spirit took over. She just said, this is the temple of God. You touch the temple, I will destroy. Out. They literally picked off their feet, blown out of the caravan, dropped their rifles and ran. Now, what was running them was petrified of her, as they are today, of petrified when we align ourselves with our spirit and awaken from the amnesia. We become very powerful. And these beings that run in our world today, they are petrified of us awakening.
I 100% agree. That was a beautiful summation of truth that's taking place. Thank you. I'm sorry.
I just mentioned one more thing, sorry.
Yes.
Her name, if anyone wants to research, was Mama Irene Gleeson. She died a few years ago. She was awarded the Order of Australia for her services. But, as I said, she was always aware of the game. We grew up aware of the games taking place. Our mother taught us the game, our grandmother taught us the game, and we were aware of all the multiple dimensions that are out there and how they manipulate our world.
Yeah.
I'm doing my thing. I'm trying to get this back into our communities.
Yes.
Sorry, button in there, but I was saying, I actually find it's taken 200 years to destroy 60,000 years of knowledge.
Yes. And that's very interesting that you are stating the 200-year time frame, because specifically all of the shows that have been previous to yours are looking at the past 200 years and how our history was so specifically altered from a time frame when we were much more advanced and functioning differently, and the process that they've gone through in order to eliminate and disconnect us from the connection to our higher powers. And that, as you stated, that is still within us. It cannot be taken away, and we truly cannot be imprisoned here. We can only believe that we are imprisoned here and powerless. We are never truly powerless. So I thank you for that very much. Beautiful statement, and we are all on board with you 100% there.
And the way that it evolved too, if you stop and have a look, is that when you are born, then every cell in your body have the genetic hereditary memories of all of your ancestors through time. And the day you're born, you're actually getting programmed. Your mother's programming you, your father's programming you, the school is programming you, the church is programming you. Everybody, everything you take on external to internal, everything. Now, they say in religion, they say a baby is born in sin. Well, I believe that's rubbish. A baby is born innocent. Mm-hmm. But what happens is it's born with the cycles of what is created in the past to come through and set up to experience. But as a physical being, it's born as an innocent little baby, but it has all the soul memories in it of the past. Now, the day we start programming that young child, that child starts taking on the programs. That thought becomes a thought form, becomes a life form. The life form is going to reproduce itself for its own survival. And before you know it, we have the ego, our choices, letting the soul, the programs, run us through time, because we have failed to acknowledge our own spirit. And the key right through time, from the beginning of time of man, was to give away your power. And it started with the old temples. Remember the temples in Europe and the gargoyles on the winged serpents on the temples. And that was to entrance you through the entrance and down to be altered at the altar. It's interesting that two major churches have burnt down in the last 24 hours, one in Israel and one in France, which are both major ritual places to these beings.
Yes, yes. And potentially, previous to them taking over, they were probably very powerful places in the first place that was positive, but they come in and infiltrate, and then they're operating it, which people have a hard time wrapping their minds around, that even though we have a positive frame of a structure in the cathedral structure, you can utilize that power either way that you are utilizing that. So you can use it very negatively, which has been done. Yes, very, very interesting, the time frame.
And that is because the key to this universe is one of the laws. The first law is the law of intent. The second law is the law of duality. And when any two come together, they create the triangle, which is the law of agreement. And what happens is that they have to get you to agree. You see, these beings are in our world at the beginning of time. they realise the universe has its own laws, and you can't violate law because there's consequences. So you need to get the people to agree for you to allow them into the game. And that's why the old temples, way back in time, first set up prayer in the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Ghost, amen, thank you. Higher self, physical body, spirit to the soul, to Armenians. And the old planet system, the old star system was called Armenia. And you've got to look, and the word amen is linked to Armenia. And where the first Pope come from? Armenia. Where was the Roman Catholic Church first from? Armenia. But Armenia was linked to the planet Armenia, where way back in time, that's what it was called. When you take the new star system, override the new star system, it's called Alpha Draconis, the home of the Draconians. And that's why the gargoyles were inserted on the churches, to get you to enter the game, and you enter the entrance to entrancement and down to be altered at the altar.
Okay. Sure. Yes. And that is another place I want to emphasize with you, these agreements, because that's very true. They truthfully do not have power. And I love that you emphasize that on your website, in your work, that they don't, unless we do it to ourselves, they cannot violate our free will. And that's our power, taking back our free will. And in a time frame that I see a lot of people initiating conversation around what they want to manifest, they look more to manifesting something materialistic. But I always think, why don't we manifest taking our free will of choice back, as opposed to what we've been convinced is, a creation here, what counts as our big success. I would rather sit down and say, I'm intenting truth. I'm intenting truth, and I do not allow my free will to have my healthy function of living here violated. And there's a lot less of that is stated within spiritual dialogue. So I like this return to this more sincere creation space. Now, when you talk about spirit and soul, can you take us through your descriptions of it? And I do want to...
Certainly.
Okay.
When the little baby's born, all the cells in the little baby become part of the soul and part of the programs of the ancestors. The day it's born, remember, external to internal. Everything that child's taking on from mother, from father, from the teacher, from the school, from the computer, from the TV, everything takes on, captures energy, becomes trapped in and becomes locked in as part of the soul. The thought becomes a thought form. The thought form becomes a life form. The life form sets up the action, the reaction, the action, reaction. You're acting and reacting. Your ego's acting and reacting to the life forms. You're feeding it, it's becoming intelligent. Eventually it evolves into an internal created entity. Then what happens is it takes over with compulsive disorder, bipolar, schizophrenia. Label it all the labels you want. But it's actually a life form with intelligence that you were the host to and you created. You see, the universe says, once it's a thought form and it becomes a life form, it has the right to survive. The universe says, I can't destroy this. It's already been created as a life form. You are the host. So it's going to use you to reproduce itself. So you keep feeding it. Now, all of that is part of the soul, the programs. The moment of conception, spirit enters, the spark of life. He links to the heart. Then from the heart comes your blood. Throughout you, through all living things, is a spirit, which is the essence of the life form. The moment the spirit leaves, you're dead. Let's take a blade of grass, let's take an ant, let's take a cockroach, let's take a tree. They're all alive. But when the spirit leaves, they're dead, because the spirit is a life form. But wait, that spirit is moving through time. It never ceases to be, it never loses its knowledge, and it takes on different forms for different experiences. Now, some of the latest things we're finding, which really blew my mind, it's only the last few months, and all the years I've been doing this, we were never aware of the true form of the end of the cycle and what really takes place. And so we'll get back to that later. But meanwhile, the life form that comes in to link to your heart, spark of life, that's your spirit. Now, spirit's there for you. It says, tell me what you want me to do and I'll rearrange the universe for you. I can't make that decision by myself. I'm here for you. You tell me what you want to do. So let's go back to Aboriginal culture. For 60,000 years, Aboriginal culture was aware of the trees, the rocks, the plants, all living things. It would sit around, it was known as the dream time. That was white man terminology, mind you. And in the dream time, they would communicate to the spirit of the trees, the rocks, the plants. They put out the spirit of the kangaroo, and next day the kangaroo would donate itself and eat your lunch. Thank you very much. It donates itself through free will choice. If you go and kill an animal without permission, then that spirit has the right to continue living by jumping in your body. Now, there today, you get people with Tourette's, barking like a dog and clucking like a chicken. You take out the animal spirit, got them barking like a dog and clucking like a chicken. If you go to war and you kill another, that spirit has the right to continue living. It can jump your body. You got 200,000 soldiers suffering mental trauma. I worked on soldiers from Vietnam War, Somalia, Iraq, Afghanistan, and a few other places around the world, and we virtually have a 90% success in one session of clearing these men. Let's take the Vietnam. Here we are 40 years after the Vietnam War. Mental confusion, mental trauma going on. We access the cause and effect. Next minute, I have the spirit of Viet Cong speaking Vietnamese out of the body. Speak to him in English. What took place? He came into my ling, he shot my wife, shot my child, turned the gun on me. I felt nothing but bitterness and rage. I wanted to destroy this man, so he jumped the body. I worked on soldiers that were dropping napalm, thousands of spirits in them. I worked on soldiers that fired a mortar into a village in Iraq. 3 people killed, those 3 spirits are in him. He's on trauma leave. And I keep going on. Thousands of cases. Not just war cases. I've got a woman who's had 3 spinal operations, riddled with pain. 40 years later, she gets the mail put on the table, cause and effect, 18. Next minute, she's screaming hysterically on the table, I totally forgot what happened. I'd head-on collision in a car when I was 18. I totally forgot about it. Thank you, what happened? The other woman died. I checked for what's known as reciprocal exchange of energy. The spirit of the other woman's in it. I brought her up. Oh, you should have heard this woman. The bitch, I'll fix her, but kill him. Well, hang on. Spirit, everything's happened now has happened before. Everything's happened now will happen again. You don't want the same thing to happen in the future cycle of time. No, let's change time. I unfolded time and space, put it outside time, and I released the spirit. The moment I released the spirit, her spinal issues that she had all her life disappeared. They weren't hers in the first place. That's just the tip of the iceberg of something we're doing.
Mm-hmm. It's the completion and bringing that to awareness, bringing it up to someone's conscious awareness. And you were saying, as you were talking about, you're seeing some different events taking place in this end cycle right now. And I completely agree that I can definitely feel and observe, I do healing work also, the multitude of characters that are functioning within people right now. My personal theory has been that like the end meets the beginning, and it feels like what they don't want us to do is ever complete the time loops. They want us to keep staying, they don't want us to complete it properly and have proper release and go up to the next octave. I think that's even why they put us on 12 months in a year as opposed to a 13 cycle, because they're trying to constantly program this inner geometry, shortchange it from us completing. So what I kind of see is, in the 9, the way it comes up and spirals around and then connects back in, a lot of people seem to get stuck up at the crown, and they come into the material plane and they feel that they've completed a lot here, but they don't really meet all these different aspects of themselves in order to resolve this. So I see a lot of people shifting and a lot of heightened emotions, which is common a 9 time frame in general. So can you talk a little bit more, about your feelings about that than what you're seeing that's different?
Well, the universe is maths and geometry. And one is the beginning. It's the beginning. It's the start. It's the first. It's the independent individual. Number 1 represents the law of intent. Number 2 represents duality. That's funny because in religion, and believe me, hey, look, I don't know religion, but what I have wrong is the hijacking of religion.
Yes.
It's been totally hijacked. Because religion is based on law. When you go and you look at maths and geometry and you understand religion, it's actually based on law. And all the keys are within it. But man has totally forgotten. And he's got hijacked by being distorted. When religion turns and says, there's no such thing as reincarnation, well, that's the biggest load of rubbish I've ever heard in my entire life. We take people back in time constantly to look at the trauma that's affecting them today. We change it and the trauma's disappeared today because they happened in a past life. And sometimes they happen many, many, many lifetimes ago and come through time. So let's take the numbers. Singular, 1, law of intent. 2, duality. 3, when 3 comes, it creates a triangle, and that's the law of agreement. The agreement is valid through time and space for eternity. So when you 2 people make an agreement, they create the 3. That agreement you made is valid for eternity. You make an agreement with another dimension 30,000 years ago or 100,000 years ago, that dimension's still active. Every lifetime you're born, then they come through. They're going to come through. They're going to come through because you're born under that dimension. Till we unfold time and space back to where they made that agreement back in time, we close off the wormhole of that dimension, and that can never be reproduced in the future cycles of time. 4 is a square. The link between the invisible world and the visible world, 4 is form of matter. 5 is a pentagram. Now, when they do the 5, that's calling something in from another dimension. That's interdimensional stuff. When that comes in, it entraps itself into your 6 and your entrapment. If you look at the mark of the beast, as they call it, 666, entrapment of the past, the present, and the future. Means entrapment of time. The 7 then changes that entrapment, sets itself up to repeat over and over in your life, and therefore you're stuck in time. 9 releases that, which reaches completion and ready to clear another dimension of reality. So everything's based on mass and geometry in the first place that we have to understand for that 1 to the 0 number.
Yes, precisely. And exactly why I'm emphasizing here too, that as they are making their predictions about what they want us to continue on with, they attempt to keep us stuck in these time loops, repeating over and over again. So,
sorry. I was going to say, and the key there is the fact that man has totally forgotten to communicate to his spirit and listen to his spirit. His spirit says, these programs in your soul that you've taken on, you haven't told me to change them, so therefore you must want them, therefore I will allow them to take place. So therefore you become stuck in time of the cycles that have been locked in. When you go to the court case and you listen to the kids and the judge says, and what do you have to say for yourself? I don't know, Your Honour, why I keep doing the same thing over and over. He's stuck in time. I don't know, Your Honour, we'll have a few beers, like somebody takes over. It does, but nobody's listening. But they're giving you the keys. If we just learn to listen, the spirit's talking out of bodies constantly and giving keys. People don't hear the spirit talking. They only hear the ego talking. They only hear the programs talking. They hear what they want to hear. But when you understand how to listen, then all of a sudden someone say, well, hang on, what did you just say? Because that person didn't even know they said it. And that's the spirit trying to give you a key that's taking place within that person. So the whole thing is that we are running the programs of the soul, and the spirit's sitting back and saying, don't go there, don't go there. But we decide to go there. And then later on we say, oh, I shouldn't have done that. The spirit sitting back and says, I warned you, you didn't listen. But when we start communicating with the spirit and listening, then it's here for us. And when we start to really align with it and integrate with it, the moment we integrate with it, it's very powerful and it'll take care of us. You'll be surprised how powerful our spirit is.
Yes, it seems to be that so many people have a difficult time understanding which is the true voice. And I think because we seem to have so many more different voices inside us right now than we did in the past. And in a sense, the way realities are merging together, it's a great confusion in time frame. Now, if we were properly prepared, that we understood that when this time frame comes, we are going to be confused because we are going to be hearing a lot of voices. And as you are doing, instructing people to look at, I use reflections. So I teach people to look at the reflections around them and their repeating places. And I can hear the tones when someone's talking is to kind of where they're working on a misconception or a misunderstanding. So there's a lot of repeating that I see when I work in numerology charts with people, that they're repeating these same events over and over again without awareness of it. So specifically,
yeah, what takes place is that we actually have, and this, again, you've got to understand the massive job of this universe, and seven represents the change. And it took us years to get to this. And, you know, I mean, I've been 50 years researching, and I've worked on well over 100,000 people, and I've worked on some of the worst cases out. And we've had physical on the table in front of us from some of these forces. I've been picked up in the early days and thrown 30 feet across the room by invisible forces. By understanding, now I enter the game of another. So it's really understanding the bigger picture of this game that's really taking place in our world. And not many people are aware at the full, let's say, manipulation that's taking place through time. So we're actually in this last cycle. And in the last cycle, it actually started back in 2013. It started. It's a 10-year cycle. It finished in 2023. Well, that's the peak tip of it. And then, of course, it'll go on for another 10 years after. But the peak is in 2023. So 2019 is the last 4 years to the cycle, to the conjunction point. In other words, it's a bit like saying, you know, our world's been going down, 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 down. Then it goes to a yin-yang and reverses the polarity. Well, we're starting the yin-yang right now. We're starting to reverse the polarity. And what takes in this next 4 years, once it hits the time frame of 2023, things will be set. And then it'll be a matter of changing the cycles of the future and move up the scale. So between now and 2023, these beings are in panic mode. They're in panic mode because what happens is this is the time of the harvest. They need to harvest as many souls as they can. And now to understand that, if I, through my free will choice, let these beings talk me into committing suicide, I am saying I don't want my vehicle. And they're in line saying we do. They need as many vehicles as they can for the future, because what happens is the cycles of similarity never cease to be. They keep moving through time. So over here on our left is the deja vu, past, present, future of the past. We're now setting up that program in the present, which is a soul programming that's already in play. In other words, we are setting up the deja vu, which is preordained for the future. We're setting up today. But if we in the present can go back in time and change the past, we create a new future, past, present, future, where nothing has to be the way it was. And that's what we're teaching our students, how to change the future right now. But these beings en masse, they're setting this game up to create as much trauma as they can, and suicides are going through the roof. They're not telling you about it, but I'll tell you now, they're going through the roof. That's what these beings want.
Yes, yes. I see it. I feel it. Yeah. It's amazing. It only takes someone being on, perhaps going on an antidepressant for literally 3 weeks or less, and suicide in the most unpredictable places. Yes, I agree. So when...
I'll just go into something a little bit more, and this is the latest thing that came through.
Sure.
Now, I've got to go back to a case that took place 15 years ago. And the very first time I started dealing with these animal spirits and people. And a little boy, he's in a mental institution, he's 17, and his eyes are weeping. And the parents got me in, it was up in the Cape. So I went there to a little boy, put him on the table, cause and effect of the eyes. And the next minute I've got, cheetah. I beg your pardon. Cheetah. I said, what do you mean a cheetah? Like a big cat, like a tiger. So I'm speaking to the spirit of a cheetah. That's right. And what's happening? I'm walking through long grass. What happened? I got a seed in my eye. What happened? I couldn't get out. What happened? It sprouted. What happened? I died. I thought, what's that got to do with the boy? Spirit of the boy come forward. Spirit of the boy, I want you to go back to when your eyes started playing at 13. What's happening? Smoking dope. What happened? The smoking of dope's irritating my eyes. Thank you. I didn't understand back in those days what we understand today. And I understand that that cheetah had evolved from the animal spirit into the human boy, where it's now in human form. Since then we have dealt with dozens and dozens and dozens of spirits that were in the past in animals. Now, I had a case just before Christmas where I had 3 students in one class, and they all had trauma online. Back in time, they're animals, and the trauma's come through. I had a little girl overseas, and we surrogated her in from overseas, and she's got a bladder infection, and she's got a small bladder, wet in the bed a lot, only young. We surrogated the first thing that came through was, there's something wrong with me, there's something wrong with me, my eggs won't hatch. So I beg your pardon. There's something wrong with me, there's something wrong with my eggs won't hatch. I said, Spirit, what sort of body you got? I'm a bird, thank you. So continue on, it took off, couldn't fly properly, bang! It fell down, hit the stump of a tree around the bladder area and fell to the ground. Well, that traumatized the bladder. We worked on it and the bed stopped. The mother contacted, she said, still infection. So a week later, we went into the infection, and it was actually the bubonic plague. It was killing animals, it was killing everything back in time. So after that, I said, okay, Spirit, what are you trying to show me? Because I didn't quite understand. For 3 and the 1, it's trying to show me something I didn't understand. Then I go down to Byron Bay to do a course, and one of the students showed me a video on New Zealand, and they've dropped enough 1080 in New Zealand to kill the population 10 times over. And the way they do that, they're carrots, they grind them up, they put them in a cement mixer with 1080, they fly across New Zealand, they drop them across New Zealand. Well, everything eats carrots. So they show you a horse, the most traumatic death. It's 3 days dying of massive spasms in the body. It shows you a cow that's eaten it. It shows you other animals that eat it. And I thought, why are they traumatising these animals? Then all of a sudden the student shows me a sign. They're dropping 1080 here in Byron Bay. Now they're up 1080 on the Sunshine Coast. And I was thought, what's going on? Why are they traumatising the animals? Byron Bay in Australia is the first point the sun hits. And then it hits across the rest of the country. So electrons hit here and they're travelling across. So they're trying to create trauma. Why are they trying to create trauma? What's going on? And Spirit says to me, it says inverse law. Well, I've dealt with the inverse law before, so I look at the inverse law. And the colonisation of the inverse law was first as last, was last as first. Australia, then New Zealand, the last 2 countries colonised. The yin-yang reverses polarity. The first is going to be New Zealand, then Australia. So that shooting took place in New Zealand, that didn't surprise me at all. Because they have to start the trauma here and work across the country in what's taking place, and then to Australia and the rest of the countries around the world. So I'm looking at this and saying, okay, but I still don't understand, Spirit, why they traumatise the animals. And then it showed me, I thought, oh my God, why didn't I see that? I mean, 50 years of doing this, I never saw it. And if you go and look at Walter Russell's work on Universal One, and it talks of the octaves of time, how everything passes through the octaves, how all the minerals pass from one form to another. Mm-hmm. And this is how the gold, the alchemy of the past, they can take gold. The previous and past, the past and present sets up the future. So the previous 2 metals would create the gold when they come and put through it. And they can make gold, you see. So what took place was, we're looking at this, and what it showed me was the Spirit moves through the octaves of time. First in the firmament, then the gases, then the liquid, then the rock, then the plankton, then the plant life, the insect life, the animal life, and the human life. And what it showed me is at the end of the cycle, everything moves up an octave. So all the animal spirits are going to come through as human spirits. Those that haven't learnt the lesson will come back as humans again. Those that as humans will evolve into another form into the future. And that's where we're at present. So they're trying to traumatise all these animals around the world before they come through as humans. That gives them access to the bodies of the future. So we're getting our groups all around the world now focusing on this, and we're turning around trauma. But we've found so much trauma in animals, we cannot believe. Do you realise it would take 17 days to wipe the human population out if humans were killed at the rate they're killing animals? 17 days. And the trauma of some of those deaths in animals and what they're doing, and how they use animals in experiments. Well, that trauma is going to come through in the future into that person that's going to be born in the future cycles of time.
Sure. Yeah, exactly.
So we need to be clear as many animal spirits as we can of the trauma to allow them to come through clear into the future. So we've our groups all around the world. We're in 42 countries right now. So we have groups working on the animal spirits around the world of trauma in their own countries and making changes to that.
Wow. Wow. Fascinating. Yes. To understand that they, when we say they, even will maybe emphasize on what your feelings are about they, and when you refer to these beings, what you're talking about. But that is something that I think is very important. What I've emphasized in the shows is that we do have to not disregard what's taking place. We have to remove as much programming as possible in order to move on to another octave, because I think that a lot of people are under the perception that we're moving on when we transition from here to higher places a lot of times. But if we look at the practicality of that and what's taking place, how could that really be taking place with all of this trauma? So I find a lot of fault in some of the spirituality where people are saying, I'm talking to so-and-so and they're doing great, and my insides are going, no, wait a minute, let's be more practical and logical, because we can assess it practically and logically and still have love and peace over it. But we need to know the system better. You were going to say?
We constantly take people back to cause and effect of where something came from. And we've actually found a mathematical formula for just how this universe works and for our humans when they come through. And it's really interesting because we've found if there's a major trauma in a child under the age of 3.5, just say a circumference. I've already measured the circumference. In other words, I want to measure a dimension. We'll take it as a circumference. So I take pi r squared multiplied by the radius. Well, y understood pi r squared is 22/7, which is 7 seconds. So what happens is I'm going to call that 3.5 instead of 3 1/7. I've got 3.5 years. So what we do is any child that has major trauma that comes through in the first 3.5 years, then I can pretty well guarantee that they set it up. In other words, say those children in the past life were violent to their kids as parents. They'll be born to parents violent to them because they created that dimension which is affecting other dimensions. And they have to experience that dimension by themselves of what they did to another. We had a case where, a woman stabbed 14 times. Whoa, what did you do to deserve that? We go back and look at it. 22-year-old, thank you, what happened? I just stabbed the dirty, filthy prostitute to death, the dirty bit, thank you. She was a 20-year-old male. Why? The church told me, thank you. Spirit set out the body, recognise the person that you stabbed in the past. Got it? Thank you. Come back in body. Come back in present day. Spirit recognise the person stabbing you in present day. Oh my God, it's the same. Thank you. Have you learnt your lesson yet? Do you understand? You will not escape. One of these laws is man is responsible for his thought, his word, his deed, and his actions. And no man will escape the cycles of time. Whatever you've done to harm another must fall back onto you. So the first 3.5 years, any major stuff you've done to another as a child is going to come onto you. The next 7 years, doctors are saying to me, we have no idea what's wrong with half the kids in here in the children's hospital. And my comment is, that's because any death trauma will come through in the first 7 years and set itself up. We had a little boy the other day, 8 years old. Mother bought it, came and said, I'm going to die, mummy, I'm going to die at 18, I don't want to die at 18, don't want to die at 18. So your mum bought it to me, put him on the table. Straight back to a past life, 18 years old. Thank you, what happened? I'm going to war. Thank you, what happened? I'm in a plane. Thank you, what happened? The plane shot down. Thank you. Now, if the plane's going down, how do you feel? I'm terrified, I'm petrified, I'm going to die. Bang. He's stuck in that last moment of death. We unfolded time and space, cleared him, he's right. After that. But people are stuck in moments of time. And that can come through time. So we find the first 7 years death trauma. Now, the first 14 years we find, that's the second cycle. The first cycle is 7, is the change. That's why in the church, they dress in a bridal gown and marry off to the common union, known as communion. The next 7 is the cycle where you're a free will being. Parents have no rights over you under universal law, so they get you to confirm yourself through confirmation to these beings. You've really got to look at the game that's been structured. So in the first 14 years, the soul programs are activated. Anything after that is a cycle of similarity, but you do get variables. Just say you got married at 28, and in a past life was arranged marriage. And we got married at 28, it triggers the arranged marriage. Thank you. So you got a variable there.
Yeah, definitely cycles of similarity happening a lot. Yeah. Always. They've specifically set it up so that we're not aware of how we used to clear these back in the day. So they removed all of the original teachings to work with spirit and clear everything appropriately so that it wasn't carried forward and we're not facing this very specific time frame.
Actually, it was actually genetically engineered to the degree within the physical body, the structure of the soul, they put a program in it. And the program was that of amnesia. So when the spirit enters, it has no control. It forgets who it is. The body forgets who it is. And so for the spirit's trapped in the vehicle, it's the life form essence gives the drive to the vehicle, but it can't do anything until we acknowledge it and work with it. And again, as I said, look at Aboriginal culture. For 60,000 years, they communicate the trees, the rocks, the plants, everything in nature. They sit around the dream time, they wouldn't talk. As I said before, this is white man terminology, because professors came out from America and they went out to communities and they saw them sitting around in this silent space, not talking. And they said, that must be the dream time. But what they really were was they step out of body into this body here of spirit. And spirit is in a dimension out here known as internal hyperspace. It's instant. It can be anywhere in the world. It's omnipresent, omnipotent, omniscient. It's everywhere at the same time instantly. So they'd be communicating the spirit of the other animals on that level and the trees. They put out the spirit donates stuff the other day for tomorrow, and the next day the spirit donates it. It moves up the octaves through free will choice. So in other words, it might decide, I'm a kangaroo this time, I want to come back as an eagle. So come back as an eagle next time. Or it might say, no, I want to come back as a human. He's evolving constantly. So through the cycles, he's evolving different forms of animal. Then we get to the end of the cycle, which is happening now. They're already coming through as humans.
Yes, yes. And so also then when we're talking about these beings that obviously are what is inside these worst of these, humanoid controllers that are here, that are setting up all of this worst of the control over us in programming, how would you say they are hyperdimensional beings? And what is your description of what you term these beings?
Okay, first off, you've got to understand we have extraterrestrials, extradimensionals, and interdimensionals. We are focusing on clearing the interdimensionals. They're the ones that are coming through dimensions of time affecting human beings. Now, to understand that, this is our world, this is our dimension. We have the rights to this dimension, and everything comes in this dimension is governed by the laws of this dimension. They had to get you to agree to let them in. So they set up. They set up the New Age movement. They set up the churches. They set up wars. They set all these games up to get you to enter the games so they can manipulate you in the games. It's when you start to become awake and you awaken your spirit that you start to understand what's really taking place and how these games have been structured. So what takes place? We go back in time. And way back in time, we had, as I said, you had the churches, the temples. You had the gargoyles, winged serpents over the temples. And of course, you would enter through the entrancement of the entrance and down to the altar, at the altar, which is a ritual that you went through free will choice. That's the only way these beings can get it. So we've got the internal ones. Now we've got ones that grow from you, your thought form, and they're evolving into an internal entity. Now, he's your host. You created him. But when you let him go, he's out there external and he's looking for a body. Because you might have somebody say, no, that's it. I'm not taking any more drugs. That's it. I'll finish with it. Bang. You let go of that entity. He's on the loose. He needs somebody. He needs a body. So he's going to go to a local pub and find somebody that he can jump and party time again. Thank you. I'm happy. Now, what takes place? So here's the internal entity. There's the external entity. Then you've got the big boys. Now, the big boys, you've got to go back in time and have a look at the old, let's say, back in time when the churches were set up, they were set up under the name of Armenia. And the planet Armenia, when you go into today and override the new system on the old system, it's Alpha Draconis. They're set by the Draconians. And that's why the gargoyles and serpents on the churches. So what happens is when you go through initiation, when you go through rituals, when you call things in, you are inviting these things into your body. Now what happens is that the Draconians, and often you hear the government say, if we don't pass this, we'll have to form draconian laws. We'll take over the draconian laws. You'll hear the government say this at times. In other words, Draconians are running the game. Yes, it's running the men who have entered the secret societies and entered the games of these beings and are taken over, and their thought forms, their thoughts are not their thoughts. They are being manipulated at that level by allowing these beings into the body. And that's major what's going on in our world today at that level. Now, these beings, they were here. This was their world till the collision. Now, when I was in New York at the Geological Museum, it states, science are where one time the moon bounced off the Earth. Well, we know the moon was hit and the billiard ball effect took place and the Earth moved to a new time-space location. It settled down. Well, I've had clients over 1 million years where the trauma's locked in. Nobody knows each other all around the world, but the same story. And we had 11 of them aboard UFOs waiting to watch as the world was destroyed, and the rest was stuck on the planet that couldn't get off. And they're literally screaming hysterically as this planet's coming in. Bang, thank you. And that's where all the dinosaurs were wiped off the earth. But these beings, this was their world. But we moved to a new time-space location, which means we moved to a new dimension. These beings now came down here in their dimension, and they want to take over our dimension. They can see into our dimension. We can't see into their dimension. Animals can see into their dimension. So they're manipulating our dimension for their own agenda to feed off humans to energy. We are an energy source, humans. Now, as that goes on further, they start genetic engineering. I've actually had hybrids on the table. I've had half alien, half humans. You know, these bases, they've produced enough, and there's enough in society today walking around amongst us. Most of the time you wouldn't even know because they look just like a human. But that's part of their game. Their aim was to take over this world. Eventually, the aim is to take over the world and let's get rid of humans altogether. This is why Agenda 21 is taking place. Although they've moved to Agenda 25, but the point is, have a look around the world what's happening. Have a look how many people are dying en masse. Have a look at the medication that they're giving people. Have a look at the forced immunisations taking place. Look at the game. You've got to look at the scale. It's speeding up because these beings want to wipe off as many humans as they can before Agenda 21 comes in. Year 2021. And that's not far off. So you can see an acceleration of governments. You know, I see governments right now today and they're trying to say everybody has to be immunised against the flu or there's a $1,000 fine. That's what they're starting to do. Rubbish, you know.
Do you feel that it's grabbing at straws more, or what is your vision of what you determine may likely play out? Is there going to be two separate dimensional worlds in a sense that are pulling apart? Are they attempting to maintain and keep people in their created world as much as possible? That's obvious, but we also know that with what you were talking about, where the yin yang comes in and the polarities reverse now and we become stronger, and that's an event that's very true. That is part of our awakening right now. It can't be stopped. So how would you see that maybe generally playing out, if you have a view of it, or if we even should take a look at it?
I find that, you know, more and more people are waking up every day. More and more people are questioning what these governments are doing and these beings manipulating governments are doing, because it's out of common sense now. They've forgot the word common sense, although common sense doesn't play anymore as far as the government's concerned, because if it was, then they'd be looking at a lot of things and saying it doesn't make sense why we're doing certain things. So I think more people are awakening because of their own actions and creating these reactions where people are waking up and saying, no, this isn't right, there's something else. There's something more going on here we have to be aware of. And then they start to ask the question. And when they start to ask the question, then their own spirit starts giving the answer. And they start communicating. Now remember one thing. When your spirit's going to talk to you, communicate, it's short and sweet. It doesn't have conversations. The entities will have conversation. The entities will tell you big stories. Not interested. But when you ask spirit a question, it's short and sweet. There's your answer. Bang, that fast. Short and sweet. And that's the difference. The spirit, it's short and sweet. There's no big conversations. When you're conversating, they're the entities. And of course, there's a whole range of things in our field. Remember, we have multiple fields around us. And those fields, other things can be in it. So their agenda is purely simply to eventually take over our world. They came here to mine this upper rock. And that's what they're doing. Yeah. First, remember, go back in time, the giants were here doing the work, but they hated it. And after, in religion, it says after 144,000 years, the Nephilim uprised. Well, it's interesting, because after 144,000, what it means is after 1 to the square to the cube, and the square is the base of the pyramidal structure, that's all invisible above it. Below it is the cube, and then from the cube goes into the octahedron, which is consciousness and crystallization. All crystals start with the cube, and they move into the different forms. So what happens is 1 to the square to the cube, that's the invisible world to the visible world, and after the past, present, future, a conjunction takes place. We're in now. This is a conjunction. And it says that Peter's soul has been saved, 144,000. It's telling us this is the conjunction, the time where we can be saved by awakening to the game is taking place.
So truthfully, are you looking at then those who are ready move up to a higher octave?
They're going to, because
Yes.
at the end of the big cycle, at every big cycle, and this is the big cycle, at every big cycle, the whole dimension turns and everything moves up a cycle. Everything. So trees coming through as animals. You understand?
Yeah.
And insects and then animals. So everything's alive in nature and the spirit. I can put a tree in. I can have a tree physically talking out of you. I just put the spirit of the tree in. And speaking out of a vehicle that talked to me in English. So now the tree's telling me what's taking place. Our culture can do this for thousands of years. But we took it further by bringing them through and having them physically talk. They can talk on that level, the spirit, but we can bring the spirit through today and have it physically talking out here. We work on animals around the world with trauma, and we change millions of animals going through trauma so it can never take place in the future. And we have them talking out of the body on the table, the same as we can bring children from around the world and work on them. Remember, spirit's linked to internal hyperspace. It's not governed by a physical mortal world.
Okay, so so that also brings us to looking at karma and having to experience cause and effect. So, you know, when we're talking here, we are saying that we are stopping cycles from happening. How do you, when you're working with someone, determine if someone is on the end of experiencing a negative karma as an effect from something they brought on before, and it's necessary for them to move through it? And at what point do you feel there is a satisfaction in it? Now, I know from my personal self, and when I work with people, that I go on an internal barometer. So there's a certain point where if I ask spirit sincerely, I can determine how much, I call it either I'm supposed to take the hit here, or I'm supposed to not take the hit, is kind of what I call it. And it can only come from an internal sense within me if I believe that, okay, I'm supposed to let that go, but this one here I'm supposed to change differently. So how do you work with helping people or in determining those points?
Okay, when a person comes along with an issue for me to look at, and we go in and look at that issue in this lifetime, and certain points are whole in the body at the time, and if they heat up and the spirit indicates I need to go back in time, so I send them back to the cause and effect. Now, a lot of the time it determines age too, because the age factor comes into this because of the massive geometry of it. So just say it's a person, a young child, and we go back in time, and we're going back to see what you did to set it up. You see, karma is the universal law of compensation, to compensate for the imbalance and to bring it back into balance. If you created, just say in the past, and we quite often have this, in the past we have people that are at war and they've killed. And it might have been 1,000 years ago. Those spirits are still in their field. We bring the spirits up that have been killed by that trauma. We unfold time and space in the dimension of that moment in time. We then get that spirit to change the future time track for itself, put aside. We get the person to go back and look what they did and how they violated the law and the trauma they've had by this spirit living its traits through them, through their life. Look at the changes, value life so they don't violate law in the future. When they change that and we lock it in, then we release that spirit. And the moment I release that spirit, and of course sometimes we have spirits that have been in war zones that have killed. In other words, you've killed that spirit in the past, but that spirit's also killed. So the spirit's inside it. And sometimes we have to clear them out. Some of the spirits inside spirits, and we have to go back through lifetimes to clear all those spirits of their trauma because they're earthbound and can't move on until they've cleared those dimensions. You see?
Yeah.
So we go through and clear all those spirits of their trauma. We change the future so this can never take place. Then we release that spirit. And all of a sudden that mental trauma, that person is no longer there. They're not being harassed. So compensation, this universe itself is very intelligent. And it says, I created all this beauty in this world for you to explore, to value, to love and to learn, and to experience. Go forth, have fun, experience it, but don't harm another. Because the moment you harm another, you violate my laws. And when you violate my laws, there are consequences. So the moment you harm another, that spirit, if you kill, then that spirit has the right to continue living in your body. It's sharing your body with you now. You're no longer driving the vehicle. Sometimes it can take over. And it can live its trauma of its death within you. And you're going through the pain and suffering of that trauma. And the universe is saying, let me know when you want to change it. Let me know when you're ready to go back and change what you did so we can clear that dimension. Because that dimension you created is affecting all the rest of the dimensions out there. And you can't move into the future and bring that with you because you'll affect the future dimensions. So you've got to keep that in your own little dimensional world until you clear it. And once you clear it, equal forces against equal forces creates null and void. And the universe will clear it because you've learned. Providing you're genuine. And if you're not, then of course I hate to be in your shoes. That's all I can say.
Yeah, that's a very valid point there. It's not a matter of just looking at it. It has to be a very internal point inside that shifts. Yeah, and a very honest part of self. Now, so you're stating that as far as a Mother Nature's observation on this, she has a generally neutral position on regarding what's taking place, except that she's always delivering in a sense.
Well, one more step above that. You see,
Sure.
You've got to remember one thing. Mother Nature, Mother Nature rules the earth. And Gaia is the earth. She's a mother to nature. But you can't have a mother without a father. So let's go to religion. And in religion it says the Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Well, the Father is the Son. Holy above. Another word for ghost is spirit above. It's a ball of light. It is spirit. Spirit is light. So we're all under the Father, and we can't have life without the Father. Because it's electrons the Father lets out that become captured as inverted electromagnetic flux into the thought form. Now it becomes a life form and sets itself up. So it's the Father who really governs everything. And he looks down and says, all right, well, you're genuine on that. All right, we'll acknowledge that. We'll move that out of the time track now so you can move into the future. Meanwhile, as I said, Mother Nature, she's giving birth to nature. She gives birth to everything in nature. But the Father's watching over everything. And when we work on another level, and we do at times, and we go that next level, very interesting what we can do. We can change physical reality. I just see how to do it.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I'm observing so many different ideas as the male aspect in general, the fatherly aspect. It seems like there are so many different programs that want to seed right now as we are potentially moving into a new octave. Well, we are moving into one no matter what, and however that plays out. Now, do you feel that these entities are trying to piggyback into the next octave, and are they able to do that?
Okay, well, to understand how it works again, stop and think. Remember, the universe never ceases to be. Now, the Spirit's created never ceases to be. So first what takes place is that, we take our thought process, which are electrons by the Father, they create life forms, captured around a little ball of light. They become atoms. Atoms create light, attract light, become molecules. Molecules dropped into your cells. Now they've set up the dimension of the thought to the thought form to the life form, the right to survive. Now, the life form is going to evolve as you keep feeding it into an internal entity with intelligence. But say you let loose one day. That's it. I've had enough, no more. Let him go. He's on the loose. He goes to the local pub, and down the local pub, party time, all the people on drugs, alcohol, and he's partying, he's having fun. But one day he says, I'm sick to death of this. I'm sick to death of jumping into these, stupid drug addicts and alcoholics. I want my own body. So the universe looks down and says, okay, you have your own body. So what it'll do, it'll start at the lowest end of the octave. And it might start as a blade of grass. It might start at an end. The moment it actually takes a vehicle, it's a spirit. Do you understand? Mm-hmm. An entity doesn't have a vehicle. It wants your vehicle. But the moment it takes a vehicle, whether it be a blade of grass, whether it be a cockroach, whether it be an ant, whether it be a tree, the moment it takes a vehicle, it becomes a spirit. Now it's going to move through the octaves of that cycle of time and experience all the different octaves of time as it moves through and evolves finally up to the insect level, then the animal level, and then the human level. And we eventually evolve into something, more advanced again into the future. Those that are ready, those that aren't, Groundhog Day.
Groundhog Day. Yes.
They're going to relive it again.
So how would you were mentioning that they have induced some of the amnesia. So have they interfered with that process of us remembering from one lifetime to another? Everyone talks about becoming more lucid in your dreams and being more conscious so that you can take more of your memories with you.
If you really go back into the Sumerian text and you go back to the beings that came here, and we've been visiting since the beginning of time, since this planet moved to a new different dimension. And you go in the old Sumerian text, it talks of the beings that came here, and the Nephilim here, and the giants here on the earth, and they hated this outpost after 144,000 years after one had squared to the cube, and the three dimensions of time, they went back to where they came from at the end of the cycle. New cycle comes. They need a new species. So they produce what's known as an adapter. I want to adapt to this way a lot. Big, solid beast. Yahweh, Sasquatch, the Stone Man, the Yeti Man, the Gobi Man. But he wasn't intelligent enough to think for himself. These beings need something that was intelligent. So he himself used his own DNA to cross the species and produce the first of the human species. Now, Adam was an Adama, but Adam being an Adama, Adam being an Adama, when the Adam mixed with the Eve in the laboratory of Eden, which is in Iraq, it created the first molecular mortal being known as the Adama into the human species, which was Adam. From that came the offset of many other species. And in amongst it was the programming of the DNA of amnesia. So one would not remember who they were or remember the past. In other words, they could be programmed. So when man first came here, it was an easy subject to program. And he was programmed into, first what happened is these draconians put the Pope up here as the link between the two dimensions. Then under him came the kings, the queens, the lords, the ladies, the masters, the servants, and the slaves. So all the slaves were doing the dirty work. But as they evolved, they started thinking for themselves. And as they started thinking for themselves, they started to riot. They started to turn against the system. So they had to create new systems to keep controlling the slaves as they kept spreading. But they keep needing the slaves to do the work. So eventually what happened is you've got to go look at these beings. They create what's known as money. Will pay you money, will entice you to do the work. So today they're enticed into doing the work and they're getting what's known as money. But you see, the money is another entity itself. And the game there now with the banking system and the money is that their aim is to entrap you into the future so you endeavour to the entity thinking the money. So example, just say you borrowed $300,000 for your home and you die next week. And they sell your home for $250,000. You're $50,000 indebted to that entity in the future. You'll be back here because you made an agreement to pay back that entity. Do you understand the metaphysics of what they're doing?
Now, do you truly feel that that has to hold by their man-made law, or is it an agreement trap, or does our signing something and commitment absolutely hold us no matter what? Is it a belief system? So
No. First off is you've got to understand it's all about law. The second agreement is the integration. When you and another party integrate, you create the triangle, the law of agreement. You made that agreement with that banking system. You made that agreement with other entities. You made that agreement. That agreement's valid through time and space for eternity once it's made. Or until we unfold time and space back to where you made the agreement and we change it for the future so it doesn't exist in the future cycles of time. And therefore it can't be recreated.
Okay, so there is a potential. I mean, a lot of people are being, we don't have a choice but to go through certain agreements and sign certain paperwork that we would not normally agree to, but in order to function here. So you are saying on one hand that there is an actual triangle of commitment created that must play itself out through time, but also there is an original contract that can be gone back to and released completely.
I don't like using that word contract.
Okay.
What I look at the word is that agreement.
Okay.
You made an agreement. Now, whether you make an agreement, you see, one thing about our culture is that, you know, my word was my word, and that was my agreement. I didn't need to put my thumbprint on a bit of paper. I didn't need to put my X on the paper. I didn't need. That's a Western way of doing things. But our culture, our word was, and you violate our word, you violate law, and the consequences to that. So we look at our word. If my word is to go into that system, into that entity's game, and to borrow a huge amount of money off that entity, and if I can't pay that entity back, in other words, if I saved up a deposit, well, I've got a good deposit now, and I borrow, so I know if this house was sold, then what's left over, maybe a bit of deposit I'm going to lose, but at least I'm paying the banks back if something happened. I'm not in debit to the bank. But to that entity being debit that bank or that entity itself, remember, the government says ABN of entity, name of entity. Every business structure is an entity. Every company is. And it's got an intent behind the entity. So the moment you set up that entity agreement, you enter its game. And if you enter the game to borrow huge amounts of money off that entity, then it's sitting back rubbing its hands and laughing. Because if you die and you can't pay it back, it's got you in the future. You're stuck in its game. Of course, the agreement you made.
And what about the places where when they stole money from us? So they're illegally stealing money from us to a certain degree. So what about them paying us back? Can we?
Well, it all depends when you say steal money from us. You know, what are you referring to when they say steal money from us?
I guess I would look at income tax.
Okay, so let's go look at income. There's a lot of groups out there, and a lot of groups I see out there are saying, you know, we shouldn't have to pay tax, we shouldn't have to do this, we shouldn't have to do that. Yet I see those groups, you know, driving their cars on a nice road. Well, let's stop and have a look. Back at the time of slavery, you know, the smallest amount of crime you did, you'd be sent off to the chain gang, and you'd be used to make roads. In other words, you're a prisoner now making the roads. Well, I would rather pay taxes, so taxes can be used to pay people to have the choice to build a road and not create slavery to build a road. Do you understand? These people still use the roads, but they won't pay taxes.
Yeah.
I see taxes beneficial to some degree, but it's when they're represented by you and they're misusing your taxes to create wars.
Oh yes, and obviously they've lost and stolen. They have stolen a lot of our monies. So in truth, they're indebted to us maybe a little bit more than we're indebted to them.
No. Let's get this right.
Okay.
When you vote to put those politicians in, you voted to put them in. You voted to put them in to lead you. You voted to be there for you. If they committed treason, then they should be treated as committing treason. You understand?
I do understand, yeah. I think it's the reason why I've never voted once. So, and I know there's the argument that on different levels of that, but that's what I was, you know, prompted to not do, was to vote when I came into here. So I think I have a different...
Well, if you're not voting, then you're not putting them in that position.
I never put them in that position, not a single one once.
Here's the other thing. Once you put them in to represent you, and you put them in that position to represent you, then you can send letters to those politicians, let it be known.
Yes.
And if they're violating law on behalf of you, then you can actually metaphysically turn that back onto them.
Yes.
You'll be surprised what you can do when you understand. Law is the most powerful of all laws, this universal laws.
Yes, okay, I agree. I agree there with you, and I have seen some people are working with the law, actual law, the proper way, and they are turning it around, and that is also part of what can take place. And they have to abide by it, and they tend to abide by it more because they know. And of course, that is part of what they're doing here, because they are attempting to escape negative karma as much as possible. So they allow other people to, make these decisions through these agreements and the people don't understand that it's double speak all the time that's taking place. They're saying one thing, people are interpreting it one way, but they mean something else completely different. Can we talk about scapegoating? Is that an actual mechanism? I tend to see, the feminine taking on a lot of this energy, repression, and scapegoating on as responsibility, for all this time frame. So is that a mechanism that they put into play so that others take on the negative karma instead of them taking? For example, they're allowed to steal the money. So we take on the negative karma of it being gone, in a sense, the experience of it, as opposed to us turning around and utilizing the law the proper way. So,
well, they're not allowed to really steal. Anybody steal, anybody steal has to come by law anyway. Not just LORE, but LAW law. The bigger picture here is you see that there are already things in play where there are a lot of people already, being, let's say, tried for treason in your country. There's a lot of things taking place right now. And that's because the end of the cycle, justice is coming, and the reverse polarity, let's say the inverse laws get activated now. So as that inverse laws are getting activated, then what you've done and what you've been part of is actually having a reverse process upon you. And the more people that awaken to this, then the more changes that they can make in the physical world of reality. Remember, as we vote for an election to put something in a position, then we are responsible for electing that person. And when the elections come around, if we elect that person again, then we're responsible for putting that person, to keep that person in that election that we put into position of power.
Yes.
And we have to really look at that and be responsible. My thing is you need more independence in government, more smaller parties, independent people are really aware to awaken, to make changes to what's actually taken place. But that's already in play. I look at what's happening in your world today and, I won't go too far into it, but you've got someone here that's running at a very high level that's from the future. Yeah, they've been playing the future since 1943. So right now, they've gone back in time, they see the game, and the game's been brought back into balance right now on many different levels, and will continue on many different levels. Those who committed treason, there's consequences of that treason will be taking place. And that's why the panic right now is panic. There are people in the physical world panicking because of their role that they allowed to take place, and they know there's consequences coming. And there are beings in other dimensions that are in a panic state because all of a sudden they're losing their control and power over many areas. So therefore they're moving to different countries and trying to take control to create the panic and the negative energy for themselves so they can keep getting fed. If we don't feed them, they can't survive. And it's energy.
Yeah. And that is very much a key to not get pulled into their drama and emotion, to have, an observation of what's taking place, but not to feed it the improper energy.
And the other important thing I think that we have forgotten and we don't look at, and that is that way back in time, thousands of years ago, hundreds of thousands of years ago, and rituals have been going on. Originally it started by throwing, people were throwing sacrifice to the gods into the volcanoes. And then, of course, they started, sacrificing, the animals to the gods and then sacrificing their children to the gods. So by sacrificing, and they cut out the heart. You've got to go back to certain cultures in the world and have a look at war. And what these cultures do, they'd cut the heart out and they'd eat it. Now, I actually saw a general on TV in Syria walking a soldier being shot, cut the heart out and eat it. What's that do? Linked to the heart is the spirit. They capture the spirit. The spirit can be programmed. The spirit can put on an object And the object atomic structure they have will take on the program of the spirit. You know, so what's happened is they have crucified, they have sacrificed millions of humans over the world. Hundreds of thousands, maybe millions in the children. We know at least 3.5 million in one hit we did, and that made changes. That made changes in your own country, what we did when we did that. But we're hitting constantly and making changes. So how many children we actually sacrificed to these beings to capture the spirit, harness the spirit? So what we're doing is we're bringing those spirits through. We're unfolding time and space. We're releasing those spirits, but we're letting them deal with their perpetrators in this dimension and the next before they move on. So we've got massive stuff taking place worldwide right now on other dimensions because of what's been taking place. And we do the same with all the animal spirits, and we keep working on them. We're going to let them deal with their perpetrators in this dimension and the next. And they have the right to do that before they move on to the next cycle of time. So, in other words, everything's coming back on them that they've done.
Yes, and okay. And in regards to, we're talking about these negative, hyperdimensional, interdimensional energies. What about benevolent assistance at this time? How do you feel?
Well, I question that. I'll tell you why I question that. If you're a more advanced positive being, then you would understand the universe and its laws. And one of those universal laws is that you cannot interfere with a species. It must progress its own pace. So therefore, the moment you interfere with a species, what do we usually do? We wipe out the species. Think about it. If you're a more intelligent being out there, then you'd understand law. He who enters the game of another is now subject to laws of the game and trapped in the game. Now, if you're an intelligent being, would you come in and get trapped in this game? No, you wouldn't. They're outside monitoring this earth. They're monitoring what takes place because what we do has an impact on the rest of the universe, just like what happens in your cell has an impact on the whole of you. They're monitoring.
Yes. Okay. I can agree with that very much so. And then in regards to our government, how do you feel about the amount and the types of women who are coming into government positions right now?
Well, I think it brings a balance.
Okay.
We need a balance. You've got the yin and the yang. You need the balance. You need the feminine and the masculine. You need balance. But sometimes I'm finding that's going overboard. And you've got too many feminist groups out there. And too many feminist groups, I find a lot of those women are so full of bitterness and anger because they've never cleared their stuff. So they bring others into their game to feed the bitterness and anger, which becomes an entity.
Yes. I was wondering, I can observe that it seems that a lot of the women that are taking those positions in moving into different places in Congress and Senate, et cetera, everything all the way through, are a different type of women. They're a little bit more militaristic like. It sort of also reminds me of what Credo Mutwa, the Zulu shaman, had predicted, that there would be more of a militaristic type woman coming in. And obviously that would also be a part of, there's likely a very natural script taking place here, a natural cycle taking place in people moving into positions, but there also is a false scripted positioning of who they would want in these places, people that they can control. So that's probably going to take place for a little while.
Well, remember, there's also, you've got to look at, you've got to go back and look at the records, and you've got to look at the game. Remember, whether male or female, it makes no difference. These beings are going to manipulate. And you would have already, if your election went the other way, you would have already had World War III.
Yeah, I agree. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, we have really covered a great deal of the information that, and so much more that you have added in. That was a wealth of information and really extremely stimulating for me to be sitting with you and talking with you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join this series. Everything that you talked about is part of what people will need to know and integrate with what's taking place right now?
Well, I think a very important place with most people is to take that time to sit down. And when you go to nature, and sit in nature, and be silent, and be aware. The keys here is to be silent and know that I am God. In other words, to be silent, listen to your spirit, because if you go even into your own religion, it states, God is spirit, the spirit is God. Listen to yourself. You are the creator of this universe, which is you. Start to acknowledge you. Start to acknowledge your own spirit. Start to listen. Start to talk to it. Start to acknowledge it. And watch the change that will take place in your life the moment you do.
Absolutely. Big changes right now. And also, can you tell the listening audience about your work opportunities, how they can work with you, and how to reach you?
Look, the best way is if they go to my website, www.holographickinetics.com. We have 90 pages of information. We have over 20 odd videos in there of information. We teach. We're in 42 countries around the world right now teaching. And as students learn, then they go up to another level of what I call the research groups, where we're doing things around the world and making changes. So you go to the website, and we're at present, I think we've got next, just hang on, 19th, what's today? 17, 2 days' time. So it looks like 2 days' time we start teaching in Dallas, Texas. And then next month it's going to be Chicago. And down the track, because we're in all different countries, we're teaching in the UK in May, and then into Europe, beginning of June. So we have constantly, and here in Australia, every state in Australia we teach, we're constantly teaching because we really need thousands of people trained to understand how to get this old knowledge. This old knowledge, actually, this is 60,000 years of knowledge. It's never been released before. You know, I'm just lucky that I came through with all the memories of the past. I was taught by my ancestors on the OAH, and I spent 50 years of researching to understand the science behind it. And it's a science, but it works when you apply it. And that's the beauty of this. Nothing has to be the way it was.
Yes. And a super big emphasis on that. Nothing has to be the way it was. We need to release all concepts from the past and allow a new creation without all the programs in.
That's correct. Yes.
Well, thank you so much, Steve. I am going to be saying goodnight to everyone here at Twilight Epiphanies Radio. And next week coming on, I will announce my guest during the week. I'm not sure who that is right now. So thank you so much, Steve. And I wish you all the best. So good night.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Thanking you. Bye.
All righty. Bye-bye.